Alright guys, we pretty much wrapped up our build on this old Bachmann HO pancake motor. What we need to do now is make some handrails. And this is going to be a real simple brass handrail build. We're not going to do anything fancy. Anybody can do this. We're going to make some brass stanchions, and then we're going to go ahead and solder them, and then shape the solder, paint them, and install them. So what I got here is some brass rod, which is .02. It's number 8159. There's $1.50 at the hobby store. Then I've got a whole bunch of kinds of pliers here. I got 7 kinds of pliers. We don't need 7 kinds of pliers, but we're going to find out which pliers are actually true and which ones aren't. Some pliers, especially cheap ones, they don't close all the way to the end. So at least we're going to figure out which one of these needle nose is going to work for this bending. And this is a lineman's pliers to make kind of big bends. So we're definitely going to use that. We got this little spring-loaded pliers. We may or may not use that, but I'm thinking we're going to use this to make ourselves a coupler release bar, possibly in a little while. And I got my Xuron flush cutters. These are pretty spendy, but they're always nice because they can cut fine and they cut straight across. And then I got some big cutters. But otherwise, ultimately, you're definitely going to need one decent pair of needle nose, and I highly recommend some linemen's and a cutter. Then we're going to use a pin vise. Now I could put this on the drill press, knock this out in just a minute, but I know a lot of you don't have a big drill press setup like I do, so we're going to do it the old school way, and we're just going to use ourselves a pin vise. And I just eyeballed the drill bit for it. I think it's probably an X-Acto drill bit or something I got at the hobby store, and it's pretty close. It doesn't have to be right on, but the most important thing is that the handrails actually go in the hole without having to push on them. Now when we used to use piano wire to do this, it was a different story. Piano wire does not bend that easy. But piano wire is really hard to form, and it's pretty hard to solder. This brass stuff's really pretty flexible, easy to solder. So we want a hole where our stanchions can go right in. Okay, now on the body, as you can see, all along here, I never did file off any of the spots where I cut the handrails. I'm just going to use those as a guide of where I'm going to put this brass wire. This is a low detail build. There's nothing really highly detailed about it. In fact, the only detail that I added to this was this little anti-climber that I made out at L channel, and that was to give our front end some strength to it. Otherwise, there's nothing else. And I'm not filling in all these cracks and lines or stuff. This is basically one of our C-list locomotives. It only needs to be good enough to be in the background, and that's what we're going to go for. Alright, I'm going to get started here. I'm going to drill some holes, and then we'll see what we got. Alright, let's take a look here. How do you use the pin vise? It seems like it's pretty obvious, but a lot of guys end up just breaking their drill bits. What I got here is a dental pick. And you can use the little spike for your X-Acto knife. That's another way of doing it. You can use a heavy pin. You could even use the old X-Acto knife if you wanted to do this. But all we're going to do is we're going to mark the spot where we're going to drill the holes. And I'm not measuring this. And you'll see why later. Not necessary to measure this all out. All I need to do is roughly put the holes in the same place. And I'm just going to eyeball it. Since I didn't file off the stanchions, and I've got this little part left over here. I don't know if you can see that real well. There's a little spot where the stanchions from the handrails used to be. I'm just going to put a hole at the bottom of them. All I do is I just need to poke it right where I think I'm going to put the hole. Go right down the line. And like I said, I'm just eyeballing this. Not measuring it, not trying to be exact. We're going to camouflage it when we're done so that you can't tell. They're not going to be even. And we're not trying to make them even. We're not trying to make them exact. Remember, we are working on a C-lister. A C-lister is a locomotive. It's not your rock star, not your TV star. It's just your supporting cast. This is a background locomotive, but a fully functional one. So we're going to do this thing so it can appear in photos, so it can participate in operating, works as good as it can, and looks decent for like next to nothing. Okay, now I take my pin vise and get right down here. I've got my little tiny starter hole that holds my vise in place, and then just, I don't need to put any pressure on this, because if I do, I'm just going to break it off. Let's see if you can see that here. And I'm just going to twist it around a little bit. And sure, I could use a drill press or a Dremel tool. The reason why I don't like using the Dremel tool is you can melt it. I'll tell you a trick for if you're going to use a Dremel tool, just snip off a piece of your wire, especially in piano wire. Use that piece of wire as your drill bit, and you'll make decent holes. But if your Dremel tool is too fast, you end up just melting a hole in things. Okay, there we go. We made it all the way through. And so I'm going to turn this, and hopefully we can do this whole thing without breaking this drill bit. Okay. Here we go. That's one. Now I'll go ahead and I'll drill the rest of these, and then we'll start building some stanchions. Alright, I have drilled all of the holes with the pin vise without breaking it. So we got holes all on here. Now, I have not made the holes that go on the cab, right here and here. And I have not made the holes for the front, which we're gonna do a little differently. On the front, we are going to put the stanchions in the top of this anti-climber that I made. And then we have to figure out where we want to put the holes on the cab. And to do that, we are going to go ahead and find a picture of something similar to this that we can use. So let's go and check out my Minnesota commercial gallery, since that is basically, we're kind of doing a design here that is a lot like the Minnesota commercial. Red and black, red and white, that's kind of their thing. So let's take a look here. Alright, now if you can all see that, what we're going to look at is probably this B23-7, which is pretty close. Let's take a look at that there. Nice big picture. As we can see here, if you can see my mouse here, the stanchion, the handrail, is mounted to the outside next to the window. Now on ours, we don't have a lot of room next to the window, and I don't really want to glue it. I kind of want to insert it. So, yeah, let's think about that for a minute. So let's just think about what we're going to do here. Let's just take a look around at the rest of the stuff. So we can see what kind of bend we're going to need to make here. And you can see on there, look at their front end of their anti-climber. They're mounted in the top. Now, if you look on the sides here, they have these channel ones, which we're not using. We're just using plain old round wire, and we're going to solder it, and then we are going to shape it. And that's how we're going to do it. Now, they paint theirs red. Ours are going to be black with the white ends on them. And, alright, so let's drill some more holes, and then we'll take another look at something. Okay, we didn't have to worry about the cab, because if you can see here, I don't know if this is focusing in on that, there are already holes here, which I wasn't paying attention. There are holes right here. They're in the side of the cab. They're not like our prototype up there. But we've got holes here, and we're just going to go ahead and use them. We're not going to try to get fancy on this. So now we just got to drill some holes in the anti-climber. Alright, so check out Minnesota Commercial 75 here. It's a B36-7. And what I want to show you is this front handrail. As you can see, they have a chain across there on two separate stanchions. We're not going to get that detailed. And they have a cut in the middle for their step. That's something that we can do. I don't know if we're going to do it yet, but we can do it if we want to, since we're soldering. Now, I've got the holes in here. If you, I don't know if you can see those holes there. How did I do these holes? I just lined them up with my Mark 1 eyeball. I took my dental pick and I just poked on the top of the deck, kind of lined it up with some details on the body, and I did not measure it. It ain't straight, they're not perfect, and it doesn't matter. We don't need to do that. This is not going, we are not entering this into some contest where someone is going to measure the distance between these posts and find out if they're in the right place. What we want is a strong post to hold our handrail in place so that we can, this can be an operating locomotive. And it can be an operating locomotive. We don't have to worry about busting off the handrails. And I'll show you someone in a little bit here how we're going to compare.